Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast. Hope you're having a lovely day today. Wow, rock and roll. We just had a beautiful weekend here in Chicago. And Jonathan, you're up in New York?
No, I'm in Western Mass.
Oh,
I'm
Western
just
Mass.
in
Okay.
the Berkshires, just adjacent to New York State.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it, got it. But you're from New York?
Yeah, born and raised in Brooklyn,
Okay.
old Brooklyn, and moved up here around 30 years ago.
Oh man, okay, really, really nice. Well, we're gonna get into your background in a minute. As everyone knows, this show is all about helping you to be that lawyer, someone who's confident, organized, and a skilled rainmaker. We've got a lot to cover today, and we're gonna have some fun. And Jonathan's gonna be an amazing guest. We've got a great quote. I love when it's a new quote, a quote I haven't heard, and a quote that really is, when I read it like three times just to make sure, I kind of get it and it resonates with me. But I want to hear your take on this. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And that's Buckminster Fuller. And I'd never heard that before, but I would love to get your take on that. And welcome to the show, by the way.
Well, thank you, Stephen. Thank you for inviting me. This is my first podcast, and I'll
All
try to
right.
behave accordingly.
If by
So
behave
yeah,
you mean have fun and enjoy yourself, then yes.
that's exactly what I mean.
Okay.
So my thoughts on that quote, is that what you're
Yeah.
asking? Yeah, I think that it's been a model for my career, even though I didn't know it. Meaning, I sort of was executing what Fuller was talking about and only then found the quote. And I think as you were alluding to in your opening comments, it's my reaction living in a world of, big law and all the dynamics that go with that.
Yeah. I did this a little bit in my career, meaning I started off doing coaching and I was only doing coaching, which is great and important to do. For lawyers, I was working with entrepreneurs and I updated it to coaching with a training component, right? And so I'm one of the only lawyer coaches in the country that has a full class of, 12 to 15 lawyers from around the world that are in a class learning the skills in conjunction with the coaching model, which most lawyer coaches have. And I feel like that's, kind of right in line with this quote in the sense that I feel like the coaching model, I know it still works, but for me, in my mind, it's somewhat obsolete and that I would never go back to. And people that want to just hire me as a coach, I tell them no. I'm not going to do that. If you don't want the training component, let me introduce you to some coaches that's what they do, because I just believe in it so fully. But anyway, we're gonna get into it. So, Jonathan Baum, you're the founder of Avenir Law, Avenir Guild, and let's get a little background on you because from big law to solo, and kind of how did you get into law, and then how did that convert over to the solo and where you've taken it?
So can I just challenge language right out of the box a little bit?
Sure.
I do not consider myself a solo.
Okay.
Solo has all these implications, particularly in a small town where I am, of, sort of like matrimonial at 9, DUI at 11, and a real estate closing at noon. I view myself as an independent lawyer, as distinct from a solo. And I think it's a language issue that afflicts the entire profession.
Well, I'm glad I
Uh,
brought it up then.
yeah. So I know I'm not answering your question,
No, no,
but
no, but let's go back to your background in a moment, but just take a moment, another moment on that. So solo versus independent, and you're again, you're changing the existing reality of what people that are on their own would consider themselves, and I just want you to take another moment on that.
sure. So I think it's an important distinction. I think that by independent, it means that I view myself as capable of doing very much the same work as a major law firm can do. My practice is 90% funds and asset management, which is usually the realm of, the big shops, Sidley, Schulte, to a certain extent, Seward, the usual players in that space. And then there's, of course, another tier below that. I do the same work, and I think it's a bold claim, but I feel like I do the same work that they do. And the clients that I have often have migrated from the big firms to me. Um, so the question may then be, how could you possibly do the same work as a firm of 2,700 lawyers in 13 cities in 11 countries? And the answer is that when I get an engagement, I do a sort of Mission Impossible thing, going back to the old TV show, not
Mm.
Tom Cruise, where I ask myself, what expertise is required to get this project done, whether it's tax, Cayman, whatever the underlying asset class might be, biotech, distressed debt, what have you. And then I assemble a team of those people who I need in order to get the work done. I then lead the team. I often do a lot of the work if it's a securities offering. Um, and we get the job done, we get paid, we go home.
Yeah.
Although I'm home all the time, but
Right.
you
So
know,
I guess the term solo really puts someone a bit on an island where you're more of a collaborative, independent, working with teams to assist the clients in getting their issues resolved and helping them with whatever they need is sort of an outsourced GC type of role.
I think that's right. And I think though that my model, if I could push it even further, is actually far better than retaining a major firm. So because when I need to find an IP person for a particular project or a biotech or what have you, I can go anywhere. I mean, I can contact anybody in any firm where they may be. And they love it when I ring because they are basically the origination person at their firm getting full credit for that work. As many distressed debt people as a top five firm might have, I have everyone at my disposal. I can call anyone. And I've never yet had a person in a big firm say, or any firm say, no, other than for a conflict possibility. I lost your sound.
Okay, sorry about that.
You're back. Okay.
Yeah, my son was actually just leaving for school and I was saying goodbye to him, so I muted myself for a second.
Oh,
But that's
okay.
okay. But let's go back then for just a minute to talk about your background because the things you're doing today are assuming very different from where where you were started. And why did you get into law? What was the push?
That I was not going to be successful as a classical clarinetist.
Okay.
That I trained my whole life from, grade, middle, high school, college. I went overseas to study clarinet. I was competing overseas to get into the Paris Conservatory, looked around and I thought, oh my God, this world's a lot harder than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
So, I went, I don't know if that sounds terrible or not, but sort of law was my default, and satisfied my Jewish family's desire to have a professional. But in terms of the work that I did, I hadn't really thought about it, but from the very beginning, I was doing security syndication, IPO work, and I benefited from having one of the greatest mentors ever, and a man named Monty Wetzler, who's since passed. And so my professional career is really centered around securities offerings, both as a lawyer, and then I went and worked on Wall Street for a while as a banker, then came out again. But that's sort of been the center of gravity for my work. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. In the big firm, look, I don't want to speak ill of any group or whatever, but it definitely feels like they are, leveraging talent to make money and bill hours and there's a lot to be learned, but I think there's also maybe a reason to leave and again, if you can't move up, where are you moving? You're just kind of moving on. What was your experience in big law and what are the sort of the challenges, benefits of leaving and why you left?
Well, the way you pose the question makes it sound far more thoughtful than I was.
Okay.
I think a
I've
lot of
been accused of
misconceptions.
worse.
No, no, it's just that, when many people, particularly my classmates, look at my career and where I wound up, and they think, my gosh, how did you plan? How did you execute? And I think, oh my God, you have no idea.
Yeah.
So basically, I was with Fenwick when they had a satellite office in New York back in the mid 80s, I think, and they were closing that office. At the same time, I had a big client at a big wirehouse, big investment bank, and they invited me to leave law and go down and be with a firm called, at the time, E.F. Hutton. We were acquired by Shearson. So really, it wasn't as willful as
Okay.
you make it
Yeah.
sound. And I don't know if you're asking for my trajectory, but I was on Wall Street for a while. Then I went and worked in, at the time, was the largest financial services bankruptcy before Lehman. That consummated, met my wife, love of my life, had a
Yeah.
baby. We had a second home up here, which is very popular for New Yorkers. And then one Sunday afternoon with a 9-month-old, I just like, why are we going back to New York?
Yeah, yeah, this
And
is
we
it.
and we never went back.
But thinking about yourself, but maybe even more so about other lawyers that are listening right now that may be at big firms or that have had maybe a similar experience. I mean, what are the challenges of leaving that environment, and what are the benefits of
yeah.
being independent?
I think the starting place is to have clarity on your risk and your exposure.
Okay.
So over the years, my friends in the big firms would say, how do you bear the risk of being, up there in the Berkshires on your own, And I said, and I would always say, how do you bear the risk of being in a big firm where if you don't make your number, you're going to be, now there was a big article last week in ALM about de-equitization. I'm sure you saw it as well. Um, and we would have these conversations that went nowhere, which is that they were just different risk profiles. And you and I chatted when we spoke a few weeks ago that, what do you call it? Me Inc. or
Oh, I
what's
call the U Inc. Everybody's a
you?
U Inc. and they
Yeah,
don't
and I think that
realize it.
if you don't think you're a U Inc., you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
And so I, if I were talking to someone in a firm, I would say I don't think our risk profiles are that different. I think we both, we all, live or don't thrive based on our relationships with clients. We can get into that more deeply if you want, but the typical pushback from colleagues and friends in the big shops is admin, infrastructure, all that sort of thing. But when I walk them through it, particularly how much money they're leaving on the table in terms of what they actually take home, um, you know, I think, the way I work and live is a very compelling economic argument. I mean, I take home 99 point, I don't know, 7% of every dollar I bill and collect.
Yeah.
Um, there's nobody in a firm gets anywhere near that. If they're over
Right.
50%, it's a good day.
Well,
Uh,
the other add-on to that, Jonathan, and again, 90s and 2000s is different than even today from a standpoint of the ability to work remotely, the fact that Zoom is now an acceptable way to manage, people and clients, the fact that VAs exist that can take care of admin, paralegal, a lot of the different things like you don't, but there's the feeling that when someone goes out on their own, they're going to have all this overhead and all this responsibility, and some of them get overwhelmed with that. They do.
I, I
um
do, and I typically walk that person through every element. Tell me what you need,
yeah.
and let's put a price on that. You need LPL, you need admin. Let's talk about that.
Right.
You know, and if I have a problem, if I don't make in what I think is my number, my only conversation is with my wife. I don't have to meet with some managing partner who's got me wondering whether I'm going to have an office next week. Um, but I think going to your point, if you just get a little bit granular and say, what do you need? You know,
Yeah. But
and
is it was but it sounds like you had some business when you left that air, the big law, and then in the secondary experience you had. Is that part of what lawyers should be thinking about to go out on their own, would be to, just maybe, have a few clients under your belt that can, you could bring in some money and get yourself started?
yeah, I mean, we had a new baby. I don't know if I had any work when this big bankruptcy consummated. Maybe I had one client,
Okay.
but I think to your point, it doesn't take a lot of water to float my boat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm living in a small town. I'm living in a 19th century Victorian. I just don't have the overhead. I don't mean just professionally, but personally.
Yeah.
I think we live well. We just came back from 2 weeks in Italy. I
Okay.
mean, it's not like, I'm sitting here
Lovely.
eating. Yeah.
But
Uh,
I think there are people that are in, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with this, but I mean there are people that work at big law. They make, let's just say a number, 500,000 a year, and they're living right at that means. Their house is too big. They got 3 kids. They got a private schools. They got all this stuff where you know any extra, it's just like, how do they get out? They're in a situation that seems like they can't make change because they're they're living beyond or exactly at their means.
well, I think that's a lifestyle issue. But again, exiting Scarsdale, I'm sorry, exiting suburban money center cities is a way of improving your own bottom line.
Yeah.
The other point I think that comes up frequently in my conversations is I'll lose clients if I'm not at a big name firm. And I take it and I run with it. I say, you're absolutely right. I mean, assuming you're right, my argument is you can lose half that client base and still do better bottom line.
Yeah.
And then we can get into other questions beyond the scope of our call today as to if you really think that leaving that firm is going to cause you to lose all those clients, I would ask you, are they really your clients in the first place? But
Yeah.
that's another conversation.
Well, and again, I think there's the work you do on cases, and then there's the relationship. And there's a number of different, hands that might be in that pot pulling that client in different directions. I think the big argument's going to be that, and this has been said so much, as soon as I say it, your guys are going to light up and you're going to go, yep, that's it. That, who wants to do a bet the farm or bet the litigation, without the big law name, right? And
Okay,
so,
so
yeah,
yeah.
that's what I want to debunk a little bit, because I think that was a conversation you and I had that where my eyes lit up when you started talking about how you've kind of gone against the grain on that.
So I'll try to make really two illustrations. I just completed a $500 million offering, private placement for, I don't want to go into the strategy. It's so unusual, they'll be able to identify the client.
Okay.
And this is the fifth fund I've done for them. The first three funds that I did with them, their institutional client base, or at least the IR person, the investor relation person at the client, felt they really needed a big firm on the book. And I said, fine, give me a name. Tell me a big name, a big law name that you want. And they gave me a name. So I called someone I knew there. I said, look, I got this engagement. They want your firm name on the book. And they said, oh, we don't do guarantees. We don't just sell our name. I said, fine, do as much work as you want to do. Treat me as like a talented junior associate or something. I don't know.
Hmm.
So I would produce all the drafts. This shop would move commas around and maybe help me on tax a little bit. And their name went in the book. The client was happy.
Yeah.
The IR person was delighted to go overseas with this book with this big international firm. But after the third deal, oh, and by the way, the fees, the other firm, the big firm's fees were the same as mine. But
Hmm.
even combined, they were one third of what would have happened had they walked in the front door of this other shop.
Yeah.
By deal three, my client was saying, our clients are fine. They don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Just
Don't worry about it.
don't worry about it. So that's one response. If you need a name, you can find a name for, again, in my world of securities offerings.
Yeah.
Do you have time for just another quick
Yeah.
example?
Yeah, we do. Absolutely.
So the other example I would give would be where I was outside GC to a fund that had gotten drawn into a regulatory investigation. And they reached out to me to help, like, how do we sort this out? So what we needed was, that's not so big name. We needed a really strong broker-dealer regulatory person. We needed someone who understood the regulatory environment in that state. We needed a strong litigator. We needed, if everything went to hell, we needed a lobbyist who had access to the governor of the state. And I realized there was no one law firm that had all of that talent. So I got regulatory powerhouse out of Washington. I got the former securities commissioner of that state who was in private practice. I created this little team. And the client loved it because
Yeah.
they knew that if they had just gone through one door, they never would have had that talent base.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
like,
it's awesome. And the again, I think people, going back to our original quote, right? They're just fighting the existing reality, which is, no big companies are going to want to work with me because I'm too small for them. And they're not thinking about the idea of partnering. They're not thinking about the relationships that they can bring in from other places. And you've done that. Exactly that.
but I don't want to minimize that point you just made. That is huge. The old saying that no one got fired for hiring Cravath, for example.
Hmm.
But, I used to work with, I think I can, oh no, she was became about to become GC for one of the biggest insurance real estate firms in the world. And she and I talked about the, so-called Cravath issue. And she said, you know, she just didn't believe in the model. I mean, she got it. She would often go to big board meetings and the board members would want to know that, big firm was there. But she was able to get her board to realize that, it's not the name, it's the person.
Yeah. There's
That
a
you
person at the big firm that's handling this, and the fact that they are associated with a big name doesn't, make them immune to mistakes or whatever. I think they're just saying, well, at least I hired the big name. Nobody ever got fired for hiring the big name. Is that's been pushed around for, decades.
So I think, the perspective that I'm trying to promote is that that ultimately, because I used to be a GC as well, that ultimately it's the person. You need to be hiring people, not firms. And if you truly believe that, then my business model makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That my clients work with me because of me. Obviously, I don't have a big letterhead behind me.
Yeah.
Um, but it's really about the relationship, and the client has to be one that believes in you, frankly.
Right. Right. So how does this all wind up together for lawyers who want to craft a fulfilling professional life? How is your model or just your philosophy valuable to the people listening right now that are either independent or small firm or whatever situation they're in?
I think it's an alternative. And I think that the starting place is to do a very frank risk assessment of where you are
Yeah.
and compare that with other modalities. And that may not just be being independent. You might find, that you want to have one or two other people with you.
Yeah.
And the other point I would make is talk to your clients. I think a lot of stuff goes unspoken. And I think that if you talk to your clients and ask, begin to test the waters a little bit and say, look, if I weren't with blah, 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 how would you feel? I must tell you, I've heard the other conversation sitting at the Beverly Hills Hotel years ago where somebody was confiding with a client that they're leaving they're combining their boutique firm with a monster firm. And I'm just sitting having my fresh orange juice. And it was devastating. This big client turned to his lawyer and said, I am so sorry to hear that because we love the fact that you were a small boutique and we got
Yeah.
this personal attention. And I
Right.
almost dropped my breakfast.
Yeah, it's I tell you, I love what you're saying in particular about it's the lawyer, not the firm. And we really need to push that forward because there are lawyers at big firms or mid-market firms that are managing relationships that are developing friendships with the GCs and relationships with the CEOs and the people that are in charge. And they can do whatever they want. They can stay in big law and continue to build the U Inc., right? Their business with that umbrella. And I think they're
Right.
going to live a very happy life doing that. Um, and then the other side of it is having the ability to move laterally if things go south with the firm or go out and be independent. I think there's just all, and of course this is leaning into my stuff, which is business development. You need to have the clients and develop the origination in order to have some power, because if all you're doing is worker bee, I think that then changes the ability and the interest of how you may go about being independent.
Yeah, I think maybe this sounds going to
But
sound a bit
if you
aggressive.
just real quick, if you go independent but you're not a client developer, then let's say you leave big firm, you have no business, no relationships. It was also everyone else's. You go out on your own and you still don't have the skills to develop business. Well, you're maybe not in a great situation. You're probably in a risky situation.
But I think that's true where you are. Meaning, I think,
Right, staying.
yeah, so it goes back to the opening point that you and I've been talking about of you Inc., me Inc., whatever, that
Yeah,
that the way the practice has evolved in the 40 plus years I've been practicing is that our only security rests in our relationships. I don't think that's a great mode, a great business model, but that's where the profession is today.
yeah,
And just to put a fine point on that last comment is that I think that you can use independence as an affirmative marketing tool. I know that sounds really, and I think the answer is yes, and for the reasons, we've gone through in our little call, our conversation today. So,
I mean, look, if I can have the same lawyer and quality that I'm getting at a big firm and for lower rates because they're on their own, I don't know the downside for me, right? As a business,
yeah,
whether that's estate planning, whether that's litigation, whatever it might be. I mean, it
yeah.
might, it's just and that's why it's been said for years. I'm a big firm attorney at low, independent rates or whatever it might be. That's kind of been played out, but that doesn't change the fact that it's true.
Right. So it's a bit ironic. It's a bit of an inside joke, but I try to peg my hourly rate to a first year associate at a top law firm.
Okay.
Meaning
That's
like,
kind of how you're doing it. And I like that. I would say I would just give some advice to everybody as a non-lawyer working with lawyers that, test that a bit. Meaning if that's where you are now, Jonathan, but no one's really arguing your rates, everybody's just totally fine with them. They might be lower than they could be.
I
Um,
should add to this, I'm sorry, Steve, that I rarely bill by the hour.
okay. Okay. Yeah. That
That
changes things too.
that
Sure.
most, I mean, it's a whole different conversation, not for today, but I've done so many private placements. I've done so many IPOs that if I don't know how much time it's going to take, shame on me.
Yeah.
So
So it's project based, which makes
absolutely.
sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic, man. Let's wrap up with and by the way, thank you. Everything you said and I think just inspiring to attorneys that are looking to be independent, whether they're staying at their firm or going out on their own or they're currently on their own. I think this was all, again, debunking and demystifying some of the things that have been said for years that people don't realize there are ways around. You just have to be creative in how you do it. And you shared that very eloquently today. So
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. And let's talk about Ezra Klein. So, New York Times podcast. I think he's so smart and he does such a great job interviewing. Do you feel the same about that, or you have additional
Yeah, I
thoughts on
think
it?
what I appreciate about his work in particular is the breadth of the subjects he covers, whether it's quantum mechanics, which I don't know if you ever heard that podcast of his, but I just appreciate the kind of clarity that he brings to complex subjects, which for
Yeah,
me is what I think the best that our intellect can do.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
um,
And great at interviewing. I mean, I think that's a big part of what I enjoy in a podcast is are people that are able, listen, I'm back in the Howard Stern days and I know that there's a lot of, racy stuff involved with him, but if we get down to the bottom of it, like who gets more out of people and learns about them and on a personal level than him? Not many people.
I think
So,
I mean, it's a very hard skill, and I'm always aware when it's done poorly. Where
right.
where the interviewer just gets too caught up in like sort of this fangirl, fan guy thing. But
Yeah.
Klein doesn't go there. What I don't understand about Ezra Klein is where does he get the time to do all the reading? Because he's
Yeah.
so prepared.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know if he has a team. We don't know what's happening behind the scenes. I would love to think that it's all him, but I think most of these very successful podcasters, just like with any medium, they're going to have a team of writers or a team of people
Okay.
helping assist them. So again, I can't say that, but hey man, before we wrap up, want to thank our sponsors, of course, Rankings.io, helping law firms really take things to the next level as it relates to lead generation through SEO, pay-per-click, top level websites. And of course, our Rainmakers Roundtable. If you are feeling like you're on an island as an independent or whatever it might be, and you want to get into a room full of rainmaking managing partners that can share best practices and challenges, please don't be shy about reaching out to me at steve@fretzin.com to apply and see if Rainmaker Roundtable is for you. And again, if you work for someone that is a Rainmaker, make an intro. I'm happy to talk with that individual as well. Jonathan, if people want to get to know you better, if they want to reach out to you directly and look for, more advice, what are the best ways for them to reach you?
I think avenirguild.com is the best way to learn about what we're talking about. It's a business or a set of resources that I've established for people like me or people at any point in their career. And a few articles that I've published are there as well. The most recent on Legal Dive really goes to the very subject you and I have been talking about today.
Okay.
Yeah, avenirguild.com would be a good entry point.
Awesome. Well, really, really fantastic. I was excited about this interview and this conversation since we met a few weeks ago. And what was your just real quick? What was your favorite thing about Italy?
Well, it certainly wasn't being attacked by a sheepdog while I was cycling, which
Okay,
put me in
that's I
hospital for
can.
two
Yep,
days.
I can see that.
But it was a family reunion. And so we were 21 in this huge house in Tuscany.
Mm,
And my goals, particularly after I got hurt, was just to be with family for 2 weeks. And it was successful. The heat was beyond imagination. I've never been in 93-degree heat day after day.
wow. Okay.
But I learned how to siesta, which is
Okay. Yeah.
which I never thought I would do.
I'm a big nap guy. If I have a chance to take a nap, man, I take it. I jump all over naps.
You know, who the big champion of naps was Winston Churchill.
Mm, okay. I didn't
Yeah.
know that. Okay. So we're
Oh, every
yeah.
afternoon
Every
nap.
afternoon he did the
Yeah,
siesta.
particularly
Okay.
during the war. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Well, listen, those things help. I do, if I can't get a nap, I do a little meditation too for like 20 minutes. That sometimes helps me. It's
Yeah.
similar to a nap. All right,
Mhm.
listen, man, thank you so much.
My
I know we're
pleasure.
gonna keep in touch. I would love to, continue this, continue just getting to know you better as a person, and as a business professional. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your wisdom. I think this was excellent.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Steve. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and we broke your podcast cherry, as they say. I don't know who says that. I would never say that. Other people say. Everybody else says it.
All
Um,
right.
all right. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you,
Thanks.
everybody, for spending time with Jonathan and I today on the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast, helping you to be that lawyer every single week, twice a week. Take care, everybody. Be safe, be well. We will talk again soon.